Hello, and welcome to this writing workshop. My name is Mark Williamson. Let's see if I can adjust this a little better. And today I'm presenting to you what I would say either five lessons that have most impacted me when it comes to writing. So five of the best lessons I've learned. Alternatively, you could think of this as five things I wish I knew about writing when I started writing, or even five things I'd like a young writer, a new writer to learn. And so that's the point of this talk here. Try to do about 40 minutes. Now, this is the recorded version, so there won't really be time for questions, but we'll just give it a go here. So, bit of a background. My name is Mark Williamson. I am a scientist, but I'm also now a writer. I've published one novel, A Night of as well as a children's book, Worst Dinosaurs ABCs, and I'm currently working on several other projects, including the sequel to A Night of So writing is something I've really tried to learn and develop across several years here. So, as I stated, I'm going to present five tools, five lessons. But before I do that, I need to actually kind of curl my hands down into a bit of a fist, because before we get into the lessons, I would like to smash through some barriers when it comes to writing. I've actually been watching some videos on Taekwondo with my small children, and so I've been learning some of the names for punches. So I'm going to employ these here. So employ some of my learning here. So let's break through three barriers together before we get started on the lessons. So the first barrier, it's going to be the jab. So kind of right to the heart of the things, right across. We're going to discuss the overarching question: why write at all? Why is writing in any form? Why does it matter? Well, the answer to that is actually comes in one way from Jordan Peterson, who talks a lot about writing and actually has software like Essay and other things to actually help people write, because most people can't write in any format very well. It's because writing is indistinguishable from thinking. If you can clearly write your idea, so it's clear, it's concise, it's to the point, it communicates your idea, that's essentially thinking. And so everyone, no matter what they do, can benefit from better thinking. So writing is an extension of thinking. That's why it's so important to learn how to write. It doesn't matter if you're going to be an engineer, a teacher, a doctor, even a bona fide writer of strange science fiction. It's great to write. So that's the first, that's the jab. It's important to write. Next, we're going to use break through a barrier, a bit of a cross. So going across here into specifically writing something like fiction, like writing a story, which what I do. Because you might think, okay, writing, thinking, that's important for anything. But, aren't stories, aren't fiction, aren't novels, aren't those just entertainment? So like maybe they're helpful for amusement, but they're not really, stories aren't really maybe that important. So why should we really care about learning how to write a story? Well, again, we can go back to the fact that stories are terribly important. Now, one hint that stories are really important is that humans have been writing stories for thousands of years and telling stories even before we could write them. And stories are at the bedrock of our foundation, of our civilization. Think of the Bible, think of the Gospels. Why are they called the greatest story ever told? Well, because stories are important. Why are stories important? They teach us how to live without us necessarily having to go through all the trials of living it ourselves. They're wisdom. Stories are wisdom. They teach us how to live. They teach us how to act in the world, how to slay dragons, how to become the reluctant hero, all while not having to subject ourselves to the vicissitudes of the story. There's a really great quote by G.K. Chesterton that I have actually in my handout to this talk. Can't really see that here on the recording, but it's not entirely certain he actually said it, but it's commonly attributed to him. So I'm just going to say it's by G.K. Chesterton. The quote is, "Fairy tales do not tell children that dragons exist. Children already know that dragons exist. Fairy tales tell children that dragons can be killed." So that's a huge part of stories. It tells us that, there's evil in the world, there's challenges in the world, but they can be overcome. So as opposed to the idea that, well, stories are just mere entertainment, they're not mere entertainment. I mean, they're entertaining too, and bad stories can be nothing more than mere entertainment, but the greatest stories, they teach us how to live and to live well. So that's the cross. Breaking that barrier, writing stories is important. Now, the final barrier we need to break, we're going to use a bit of a hook, kind of coming in at the most dangerous, the most pernicious sort of question, the most pernicious barrier when it comes to writing. You might say, okay, writing's good, writing stories is good, but I could never write that. I could never be a writer. And that's a real barrier for a lot of people. In fact, there's even two camps of sort of philosophy on writing. There are some people who do believe that, yeah, it's sort of writing is an inborn talent. You either have or you don't. Even some very good writers who I have a lot of respect for believe this. On the other side, there are people who believe, no, just like anything else, writing is a talent. Sure, you might, be born with a little bit more, but anyone who applies themselves can be a good writer. And an excellent writer that writes book on writing, James Scott Bell, as well as writing novels, he has this attitude. He's actually a former lawyer, and he lived his whole life. That's all he heard was like, yeah, you either have it or you don't. You either are a writer or you're not. And he believed that for many years. But then eventually he questioned that belief and actually studied writing and what makes a great story and actually learned how to write well and teach it to others. And so I'm in the second camp. I believe that anyone can become a decent writer. Now, not everyone's going to be a world famous writer who, sells billions of books. Not everyone's going to be the next J.K. Rowling or the next Stephen King or whatnot. But everyone can be a good writer if they put in the effort. Just like not everyone's going to be a world-class basketball player. If you put in time and effort and learning, trials, drills, you can be a very good basketball player. So that's the three barriers that hopefully we kind of broke through to get to the writing lessons. We had that writing is important. We had that writing stories is important, and that anyone can be a writer if they put in the effort. So with the effort, here are some lessons that I think are really helpful to help you become a better writer, to help you get started on your writing journey. So lesson one that I really have found important in my writing is the balance between plotters and pantsers. What does that mean? This terminology, I think it comes from James Scott Bell. I don't think he invented it, but he's definitely popularized it a little more. There are two kinds of people, sort of general ways to approach writing. There's the plotters. So these are people who really plot things out, as it says, ahead of time. They have a good outline. They know A, B, C, and D. The characters can go here, then here, then here. They have things all plotted out. You can think of this as the scientist, the engineer that has it all designed before he even starts going into it. You can think of this as someone who's interested in order. And then on the other side, there's the pantsers, the people who write, by the seat of their pants, that just go. They usually don't design things as much. They just write. They probably don't know how it's going to end until they get to it. They weave, they curve, they come up with things on the spot. These are the much more like the artists, the entrepreneurs, the ones who are more comfortable with chaos. And now you might ask yourself, okay, we got plotters, we got pantsers, which one's better? Which one should you be as a writer? Well, what James Scott Bell says is that actually both have their strengths and both have their weaknesses. So it's not a choice of like, this one's good and this one's bad. It's they both have strengths. And so what you really should be doing is trying to balance the two, balance the plotting and the pantsing. You want to have some order, you want to have structure, and we'll get to that later in the talk to help get yourself ready to go. But you also want to have some pantsing. You want to have some more creativity. You want to let things flow, let some characters make some jukes that maybe are unexpected. And we'll talk about creativity as well. So that's a great lesson that I've learned. Learn to plot better, and I've gotten better at plotting, and learn to pants better. I've learned how to be a little more flexible with my approach. And so that's a great thing to know. And so at the end of our first lesson here, I have a short mission for you. My mission is to think about yourself on how you write, or really even any creative project. Figure out what side you're on. Are you more of a plotter? Are you more of a pantser? Figure out what side you're on, then come up with a few ideas to balance yourself. So if you're more of a plotter, figure out how to be a little more loose, a little more artistic. If you're more of a pantser, you just like the write and go, figure things out as you go. Think about how you could be a little more like an engineer, like a scientist, like a plotter, to add a little more structure to your writing. All right. With that, let's turn to our second of 5 lessons. Our second lesson is create a quota. Think of it as a scissor coming behind you, pushing you on forward. So what is a quota? Well, quota is a certain amount of writing that you get done on a regular basis. So writing, especially writing a book, is a big endeavor. It's not going to get done in one day, 1 week, maybe even not even 1 month. So it's more important to be consistent and make progress than to try to just do things in big chunks. If you're a writer, you're going to write every day. And so having a quota lets you get into the habit of being a writer, of writing every day, of making progress every day, not thinking about writing for a week and then having a mad burst of writing and then being worn out and then not writing for another 2 weeks before you finally get up the effort to write again. Quotas help make it consistent. So there are a lot of different ways to do a quota. Obviously, you can have a certain amount of words. That'd be one common way, or a certain time frame. You're like, oh, say 10 minutes, as opposed to 500 words, 1,000 words, or something like that. And there's many different ways to help yourself in the quota. A really common method that I started doing early on, which helped, and I think is really useful, it's called the calendar method. It wasn't started by Jerry Seinfeld, the comic, but I think he popularized it. It's you get a calendar, and you whatever your quota is, once you finish it for the day, you make a big red X on that date. And what you try to do is just not break the streak. I've also heard a great modification for this because we're all weak. We all we'll fail. We'll miss a day. So the idea is to not just not break the streak, but if you do break the streak, don't break it twice. So that's a great way to start a quota. I know there's also software for that. I have this great writing software called Scrivener, which actually I can set goals for the week of words or whatnot. So that really helps me. That's what I'm using currently. But you don't need fancy software. You can do something like as simple as a calendar or anything else. Now, another point on a quota, again, it's important to be consistent, but you don't need to be tyrannical. I only write 6 days a week. I take Sunday off. I think that's a great thing to take off. I'm also sort of taking off as the Lord's Day. So maybe your quota would be 6 days a week. And it's great to start small. It's better to be small and consistent than big and inconsistent. There's actually some great research on this. I've read a couple books in the last year, Atomic Habits and Tiny Habits, which really stress this to make things small and consistent. So I would suggest wherever your starting quota is to make it small, make it achievable. Maybe only as much as 5 minutes a day of writing. Heck, 10 minutes a day of writing. If you do that every day, 6 days a week, you're going to get like 1 page. So essentially 10 minutes of writing is maybe 1 page a day. You can get 300 pages in a year if you're writing 10 minutes a day. That's an entire book. If I would have started writing I'm 34 now. If I would have started writing 10 minutes a day, so a page a day, when I was like, what, 14, I would have 20 books by now. I mean, they're not all edited and polished books, but you'd have had 20 rough drafts of books done in 20 years. So don't underestimate the power of small, consistent practice in quotas. So with that, I'll close out this one. And what I'm going to say here is our mission for number 2, having a quota. Lesson number 2, the mission is to get a calendar. You can get a cheap calendar pretty much anywhere. Set a quota, maybe just with a sticky note of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. Put it on your calendar and try to stick with it for 2 weeks. Or maybe 10 minutes a day, 6 days a week for 2 weeks. See how that takes you. See if you can use that to get going on your writing. All right, we've covered 1 and 2. Now let's get to 3. Lesson number 3 is learn story structure. So all great stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But it doesn't just stop there. Now, in the handout that goes with this learning, this comes from James Scott Bell. He actually has his entire book on structure called Superstructure. He actually outlines 14 signposts. Hopefully with this video, there'll be some links that you can get the handout so you can see the 14 ones. I'm going to cover just some of the big ones in this talk here, because really structure could be its own whole session. So you probably innately know kind of a structure of a good story. Again, like I said, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But you can dive deeper into that, and it might be helpful to sort of decide, well, how do you get from one part to another in a story? And that's where the idea of structure comes in. James Scott Bell has 2 really important pieces of structure that go from part 1 to part 2, and from part 2 to part 3. And then we'll talk about the middle one in a moment here. But the 2 things that he talks about are what he calls the doorway of no return, number 1 and number 2. So the doorway of number 1 is a structure that helps get us from act 1 to act 2. So from the beginning to the middle of the story. And the doorway of no return number 2 is from the middle to the end. And what this is, the doorway of no return, is kind of what it sounds like. It's a doorway, usually it doesn't have to be a literal doorway. It's something that happens that brings the character from the beginning of the story sort of to the middle, to the next stage, and there's really no going back. Once he's gone through that doorway, he's in it. Here's some great examples. In, say, Star Wars, Episode 4, A New Hope, Luke Skywalker, he's on his planet, he's with his aunt and uncle. The doorway of no return for him, he has this call of adventure with the Jedi and fighting the Empire. But really, the door of no return is when he comes back to his farm and his parents have been, or his aunt and uncle have been killed. That's really, like, there's no going back. No matter what he does, he can't go back to sort of the innocent kid he was before. So that's the door of no return. The doorway of no return number 2 is later on, he's joined the rebellion, he's rescued the princess, yada yada. But now there's the Death Star. It's coming towards the Alliance, and this is the doorway of no return 2. They're going to go out and fight the Empire and the Death Star. They could have run, they could have done anything else, but really at this stage, like this is, once they go down this path, there's no going back. They're going to go fight the Empire. They're going to try to blow up the Death Star. They're going to, or die trying. There's no going back from here. They can't go back to the earlier state. And so those 2 pieces, the doorway of no return 1 and 2, are really important to understand. Oh, every great story will have something like this. Another example, Lord of the Rings. I'm thinking more of the movie just because it's easier to picture it. In the first one, The Fellowship of the Ring, doorway of no return 1, pretty obvious with Frodo. He leaves the Shire. Doorway of no return number 2, which I would argue the doorway of no return is when Boromir tries to steal the ring from Frodo. And that sort of, there's no going back from there. That sort of heralds the final battle between the And really, there's no going back with the Fellowship, no matter what happens with Boromir. because he tried to took the ring. So those are really great to understand. Oh, great stories have this. Another piece of the 14 signposts I want to talk about is going to be what happens at the very middle of great stories. It's called the mirror moment that James Scott Bell came up with the terminology. And we'll talk a little bit about the final one because the mirror moment matters with the final one, which is transformation. So the mirror moment is in the middle of great stories, is where like the main character has a reflection, so like looking in a mirror, reflects on how he got there and where he needs to go. It's sort of like turning point of the story of like, oh, this is where he was, and this sort of like foreshadows what's gonna happen at the end. This is where essentially any great hero, any great character in the story has to essentially either get stronger, be transformed, or die. In the great movie Casablanca, which has sort of a character who starts out as not a good guy, Rick. He's only in it for himself. He's staying out of the war. He sort of has a mirror moment when sort of his old love interest comes back into town, yada yada. He ends up having being transformed from essentially a non-hero, so a bad guy, to a good guy. He is transformed into a hero, and he rejoins the war effort. So he's transformed. I think this is one of my favorite mirror moments in all of cinema. And again, it's in the book too, but it's more visually remembering it when I think of Lord of the Rings. Going back to the Fellowship of the Ring, they're in the Mines of Moria. Frodo is talking with Gandalf, and Frodo says, I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened. And Gandalf replies, so do all who live to see such times, but it's not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that has been given us. That is a stunningly great mirror moment. Frodo reflects on, I wish this stuff hasn't happened. I wish I wasn't on this path. But Gandalf says, like, well, that's life. That's reality. But, we can't change the past. But what we can do is decide what we're going to do for the future. And, ultimately we know in the story that Frodo, eventually destroys the ring. He has that transformation at the end. So again, in the handout, there's many more signposts, but those are the big ones. Doorway of no return 1, the mirror moment, doorway of no return 2, and really at the end, the transformation, like what happens with the hero at the end. And so really learning more about this and even digging into the other signposts will really help you be able to plot out your story in ways that make sense and are satisfying, that all sort of great stories will have that archetype. So with that, I have a mission for you for lesson number 3 is think about your favorite book or movie. Maybe go back and flip through it or watch it or wherever. Think about the story and try to write out the structure of your favorite book or movie. What's the doorway of no return 1? What's the mirror moment? What's the doorway of no return 2? What kind of transformation maybe happens to the character at the end because of the story? Okay, we are moving right along here. Let's get to lesson number 4. Lesson number 4 is to learn how to stack up skills. So again, in the handout, this is really helpful for me to learn from James Scott Bell. He lays out 7 critical factors in fiction, which makes a good story. You need to have a good plot, good structure, good characters, good scenes, good dialogue, good voice, and good meaning or theme. So those are the 7. And that's really helpful to know that there's these different sub skills, there's different factors within a good writing, because you can often write something and be like, oh wow, that wasn't very good, but what can I fix? It's too big of a problem. But if you can break up a problem into smaller pieces, you can work on each piece. In fact, maybe working on the weakest piece. You can say, oh, my dialogue's not that good. Well, I can fix the dialogue. Now it's better. And it's more manageable. And you say, oh, my characters are a little weak. Okay, I can work on my characters. You can see how if you build this up, you can make a much better story by focusing on specific pieces. And this isn't just so having a skill at different sub pieces is going to be very important. Because you imagine, you can write a book and sort of be bland in all the sections. But man, if you can go back and maybe fix your weakest one, like I wasn't that great with dialogue or characters, so I tried to polish those up the best I could. My books got better with it. And if you could, keep focusing on one little piece, do work on voice, work on plot, work on structure, your books is get better and better. There's sort of these skills are going to stack on each other. These factors are going to stack on each other. And I started here, which is talking about specific factors that you can work on in fiction, those 7. But this really has to do with anything creatively, and really life expertise in general. Is if you can stack up your skills from various different skills, you can be really successful. This idea it was talked about by Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert. He talks about it as the talent stack. I know Jordan Peterson again has talked about this several times about how kind of the road to excellence is if you can get good at like one skill, say writing. Okay, you're maybe not the best, but you're decent at it. You're better than average. But then if you can find another skill that's sort of farther away and get really good at that too, so you're good at 2 skills. And there's a lot less people who are good at both skills, especially if they're sort of distant. And if you say you get good at a 3rd skill, well, now like you're in rarefied air. You're competing on a whole other playing ground. There are not many people who are good at all 3 different things. So you can be very successful. That was like Scott Adams. He was okay at drawing comics. He was good at business, and he was good at humor. There are very few people who can draw, can understand business, and can understand humor. Another example of a writer, Matt Parker, I like to follow. He has a YouTube channel called Stand Up Maths. He writes books, so he's decent at writing. He's good at math. Okay, that's already not a lot of people are good at writing and math. And he's also a comedian, so he's good at comedy, math, and writing. And so he has best-selling books. Another great example of sort of combining skills, stacking up skills in ways that you can be really successful. There's a lot of movies that rehash Romeo and Juliet. Okay. And there are some movies that also add a comedic element to it. Okay, not as many, but still a couple. But then what if you added a 3rd element like zombies? Well, then you've got a Romeo and Juliet romantic zombie. And that's in fact what a movie that came out several years ago called Warm Bodies was. And it was a great movie. And it weaved all those 3 things together: Romeo and Juliet, so a love story, comedy, and zombies, in a way that really no other film had. And so you even can take this idea into your writing when it comes to what you're going to write about. If you can write about several different things that are fairly distinct, that almost maybe no one will have written about them before, like Matt Parker writing comedic books about math. So that's lesson number 4, stacking up your skills, whether it's specific skills in writing sections of fiction or types of fiction, or even just general skills, creative skills in general. That's going to be helpful. So your mission here, what is your mission? Your mission is, again, hopefully for this recorded talk, I can get slides up that you can see these 7 critical factors, so you don't have to remember them off the top of your head. But the factors are plot, structure, characters, scenes, dialogue, voice, and meaning. Think of those factors when you're writing, say, a story of fiction. Think of those factors. Find your weakest factor. What are you the weakest on? Are you weakest on plot? Are you weakest on characters? Whatever. And make a practice plan. Like, how are you going to get better? Say dialogue. If you're weakest at dialogue, how are you going to get better at dialogue? Are you going to just write practice dialogue? Are you going to listen to a TV show and write down their dialogue and see if you can modify it? whatever. Figure out a practice plan to improve a skill on writing. All right, with that, we're going to get to number 5, which is kind of like a high five here, is to have fun. Writing can be a long process, can be a lonely process. It might take you, even with that having quota, maybe it'll take you a year to write your first book. That's a long time. It's hard to stay motivated sometimes if you're not having fun. So to have fun, to really be motivated by anything, there are 2 types of motivation. There's intrinsic, which comes from within, and extrinsic, comes from the outside. Extrinsic motivation is something, it can be positive or negative. It can be something like your mom tells you you need to clean up your room, or you're grounded. That's motivation. Like, I don't want to be grounded, so I'm going to clean up my room. The positive side would be if you clean up your room, you get $5. Like, all right, great. When you first start out writing, there's not going to be a lot of extrinsic motivation. You're not going to have someone breathing down your neck in a negative way saying you need to finish your book. If you never finish your book, probably no one will ever hear about it or say anything. There's also not positive in extrinsic motivation. You're probably not going to get paid for a long period of time. You're not going to make money right off the bat. I certainly, unfortunately, haven't. I mean, I've had to be intrinsically motivated. Now, if you keep at it, certainly there will be intrinsic rewards that you can be motivated for, but probably not at the beginning. So that leaves intrinsic motivation. Obviously, intrinsic motivation comes from within. You'll do it because you want to, like, positive. You want to be a writer. You want to write a book. That's intrinsic motivation. It's like, even though it's hard, you're going to do it. And so you're going to need that. You're going to need a lot of intrinsic motivation as you're writing. And so part of that is finding ways to have fun, finding ways to take it lightly, to enjoy the process, to realize, yeah, like, I'm not going to succeed on my first try. Enjoy the road, not necessarily the destination. So that's, I guess that's a little abstract. So let's switch gears here. Just because the world won't offer you extrinsic motivation in the beginning, so you're probably not going to get paid, you're probably not going to get accolades and reviews, and you're probably not going to get punishments. You can set your own extrinsic motivations, and they don't have to be big or expensive or fancy. When I first started writing, if I got a certain amount of material written, I would watch a funny YouTube channel called Bad Writing Advice. It was a cartoon which taught essentially good writing practices, good fiction practices, by humorously advising you to do the exact opposite, advising you to do terrible things. And so that's funny, and actually learned a little bit about writing, and it was a fun extrinsic motivation. Oh, if I get this much writing done, I get to watch this little video. And another thing I did, I like trading card games. And so I'd buy little packs of trading card games and keep the cards face down. And every time I got a page written, 2 pages written, I could get to look at one of the new cards. And that was really fun and motivating, and didn't cost very much at all. So you're going to need to, in the writing business, you're going to need to have fun. So it'd be great to think of ways to have fun, both intrinsically and extrinsically, as you do this. So your mission for number 5, having fun here, is pick one intrinsic or extrinsic motivator and try to get that set up for your writing. Are you going to have a piece of bubble gum after you get a page written? Are you going to get a picture of your favorite author, put it up on your desk with a little speech bubble that says, "I believe in you"? Go wild, whatever you want to do here. That is your mission. So we've gone through our 5 lessons. We started by breaking some barriers, by saying that writing is important, that writing fiction, writing stories is important, and that you can be a writer. Then we went into balancing, plotting, and pantsing. We figured out how to create a quota. We learned a little bit more about story structure, then tried to stack up our skills. And finally, we tried to figure out how to have fun. So that's, I think, getting to the end here. But I do have one question here when it comes to stories. Have you ever watched the movie A Princess Bride? Okay. Yes, no, maybe. But one of the main villains in A Princess Bride is a six-fingered man. And so actually, instead of just 5 lessons, I actually have 6 lessons for you here, just like a six-fingered man. And that lesson, the sixth lesson is be unexpected, do the unexpected, be unpredictable. And that is going to give you great writing. Because why? Being unpredictable means not just simply coming out of the blue with in an unsatisfying manner, but having a twist in your story. Having something that maybe was foreshadowed but wasn't clear, and it comes in. I mean, that's what you really want for great writing, great stories, not ones that are like, oh, this is boring. I know exactly what's going to happen. It's things that keep you on the edge of your seat. You're not sure what's going to happen, and when it's pulled off really well, it's amazing. And so, if you don't get anything from this talk here, is be unpredictable. Find ways to put things in your writing that are unexpected. So to do that, I've actually thought a little bit about that now and so I've actually created a free sort of PDF called 5 Tools for Creative Brainstorming, because it's one thing they say about be more creative, add more creative, unexpected things in your writing, but then how do you actually do that? So I've actually thought about that and tried to put it together 5 sort of tools that you can practice to do just that. So there should be a link to this with wherever this video is posted, so you can get this. But essentially, there's 5 tools. There's the idea bracket, the chain phrases, idea mutation, concept smasher, and the power and thrill of naming. And so this is a free resource that you can use at your leisure to actually invoke that doing the unexpected. So we'll just close out our time here. It would really be great to do it in person, but I don't think I can see the images here. So I'm going to switch over to my computer screen, and we're going to just go through one of these quick tools in person. So I'm going to pick idea bracket. I think that's probably my favorite. And so that do with the idea bracket is you essentially create it's almost like what is it? Like a sports league playoff. You have the teams here, and the winners go on to the next thing until you get to the championship. It's just like that. A series of ideas is pitted against each other until a single winner emerges. Now, I do have some modifications to make this a little more fun. You can actually do some twists called the 3 M's. You can modify, merge, or markup. We'll see that in action here. If you have a better idea as you're doing this, you can always modify your original idea. There's no shame in doing that to make it cooler as you go through. You can also merge if you have 2 ideas that would like be a great together. You can actually merge those and move them on. And then you can also mark up, which you just put a little marker next to them if it was a great idea that you want to keep for later, but maybe not necessarily a winning idea. So let's just try this out here. So let's start with an idea here. What about a villain, like a concept for a villain? I don't know. That sounds interesting. Oops. Let's see. Maybe I can spell it correctly. All right. So I'm just gonna copy and paste these. And then we can go from there. All right. Obviously, I would have liked crowd input, but this is a recorded talk, so I'll just have to do it all myself. All right. Idea for villains. What about a second here? Caught on. Okay, my mic should be back. How about a fast food mascot? I don't know. That just sounds funny, like a villain. He like a Ronald McDonald, but he's a fast food villain. Next one. Let's just do just something like a shark with legs. It's gotta be funny here. I don't know. shark with legs. Let's say cat grandma. These are not your ordinary villains. Cat grandma. What's another great villain that would be interesting off the walls? Repairman. He could get anywhere. And just for time here. Rest, depressed, super villain. So it's like a bad guy, but he's depressed. He has superpowers and he has a volcano, but he just doesn't really feel it anymore. Maybe a tired dentist. Eat dastardly dental plots. And maybe just a little more like evil clone, just kind of flesh these out. Clone and just go like a zombie. It just kind of to figure things out here. All right, well, we got our first matchup here, fast food mascot and shark with legs. At this point, I think I'm going to go with the mascot. I think it's more interesting. Oops. Whoops. Not the best here. That's why we got to figure out how to do it live. All right, cat grandma repairman. I kind of like the repairman, so I'm going to do a little indicator. I'm going to just mark this that maybe that idea could be worked on later, but then I think cat grandma is going to win out and move on to the next section. Depressed supervillain and retired dentist. I think the dentist is funnier and more to do with, more interesting. An evil clone and a zombie. I think I'm going to merge here. I'm going to actually merge these here. I think that they're too generic, but what if we had a evil zombie clone? Like your nemesis tried to clone you to make an evil version of you, but came back a zombie. And so it's dangerous, but not that intelligent. That'd be kind of interesting. All right, we got a fast food mascot and cat grandma. And this is where I'm going to throw like another. I think instead of fast food, I feel like it's too niche. Let's do high school mascot. High school mascot. So we're going to modify it. Like some sort of like fuzzy beaver or woodchuck or eagle or something, but it's really a super villain hiding under there. I think that's probably pretty cool. Maybe do a high school sort of fiction. Retired dentist or an evil zombie clone. I still like the retired dentist. So we'll go with that. And then the final one, heck, let's merge again. That is just kind of like there should be like a Scooby, sounds like a Scooby-Doo thing. High school mascot who is retired dentist. That's who it was under the mask all along. So say what you want about this. When we came up with a villain, a high school mascot who is a retired dentist, that's definitely more creative than run of the mill. And you could play around with that and come up with a story, or maybe this would fit a story in like a high school detective league or something. So hopefully that was, I don't know, interesting. And again, you should have access to this free research. You can try out all these ideas, and there's even printable sheets at the end that you can kind of do this, write this out in person. So I guess with that, thank you so much for your time here. Hopefully this was helpful. If you like this, you can. There should be some links to my writing website. You can sign up for my newsletter to get more information. And yeah, if this takes off, if you really like these trainings, I can certainly do more. So once you get out there, use your 5, maybe even 6 lessons and get to writing. Thanks, everyone.